Okay, so let's dive into a domestic violence case from back in 2011 that had a result that honestly just seems totally backwards. A woman was told she had no right to live in her own marital home, which is, one of the biggest protections the law is supposed to give her. So, how on earth did that happen?
I mean, just look at this. These are the actual words from the judge's ruling. In a case filed under the Domestic Violence Act, a law that was literally made to protect women in these exact situations, the court said, no, you can't live here.
And that's the big question, isn't it? It just feels completely wrong. How did a judge, using a law designed to stop women from becoming homeless, come to this conclusion? Well, to figure it out, we've got to break this case down, piece by puzzling piece.
To solve this puzzle, we have to start where the judge started. And in any courtroom, you've always got two very different versions of the truth. So let's take a look at what the wife, Harpreet Kaur, and the husband, Dilvinder Singh Bedi, were each claiming. So right away, you can see these two are living in completely different realities. Harpreet says, my husband has a good job, I barely earn anything, so I need financial support and a place to live. Dilvinder comes back with the total opposite. Actually, I'm unemployed because of her. She's the one making decent money. And oh, by the way, that house, it's not even mine. It belongs to my mom. All right, so faced with these two clashing stories, the judge had to make an immediate, temporary call on two huge legal issues: the right to live in the home and the right to financial support. These two things are pretty much always at the center of domestic violence cases. First up was this idea of the shared household, and this is a huge deal in India's Domestic Violence Act. The whole point of this concept was to prevent women from getting thrown out onto the street in the middle of a dispute. The law basically says you have a right to live there, period. It doesn't matter if your name is on the deed or not. So the question was, did she have a right to live in this house? And the second question was about interim maintenance. Now, interim just means temporary. Think of it like a financial lifeline. It's money to help a spouse get by while the whole case is being sorted out, which can take a long, long time. So, given their wildly different stories about who was earning what, did Harpreet deserve that immediate support? And here is where we get to the absolute heart of this puzzle. See, the answer doesn't just come down to who the judge believed more. It comes down to what the law actually said at that specific point in time. And back in 2011, the law on what counted as a shared household was incredibly specific. The judge in this case couldn't just make a gut call. His hands were tied by something called precedent. That's a ruling from a higher court that all the lower courts have to follow, no exceptions. And in this situation, one single Supreme Court case from 2007 was running the whole show.
And that precedent was a famous case, S.R. Batra versus Taruna Batra. It defined shared household in this super narrow way. It said the house had to be owned by the husband, rented by the husband, or be a joint family property where he had a financial share. The main point was crystal clear. If the house belonged only to the in-laws, the wife had zero legal right to live there. Ownership was literally everything.
And here's the kicker. Dilvinder didn't just say the house belonged to his mom, he brought the receipts. He showed the court a relinquishment deed. That's a formal legal document proving he had signed away any rights he had to the property. This one piece of paper slotted his case perfectly into that narrow definition from the Batra precedent. And there it is. The judge's own words lay it all out. You take the evidence, that deed, and you combine it with the binding precedent of S.R. Batra, and for a judge in 2011, there was only one possible outcome. Her claim to live in the house was dismissed. Puzzle number one, solved. Okay, so what about puzzle number two, the money? Well, the court's logic here was just as direct. Step one, Harpreet herself said she had a job. Step two, Dilvinder showed proof that he was now unemployed. So the court basically said, look, for a temporary order, we can't make a jobless husband pay maintenance to a wife who is employed. And the judge was careful to add those magic words, at this stage, which left the door open to change things later. But for now, request denied. But, and this is a huge but, the story doesn't end there. Because that legal rule that the whole 2011 decision was based on, it doesn't exist anymore. The law changed, and it changed in a massive way. Yep. In 2020, nearly 10 years after this case, the Supreme Court of India decided it was time to take another hard look at that very narrow and frankly very controversial definition of shared household from the Batra case. And in a massive, game-changing case called Satish Chandra Ahuja versus Sneha Ahuja, They didn't just tweak the old rule, they completely flipped it on its head. The court said flat out that the S.R. Batra ruling was wrong, and they officially overruled it. The new rule is way broader. A shared household is simply wherever the woman lived in a domestic relationship. Who owns the property isn't the main issue anymore. The focus now is on the simple reality of where the couple actually live their life together.
So, you gotta ask the question, right? If Harpreet Kaur's case was heard today, under this new precedent, would the decision about her living in the house be different? Oh, you bet it would. That relinquishment deed wouldn't matter nearly as much. The only real question would be, did you two live there as a couple? And nobody was arguing about that.
So, you might be thinking, okay, if the law that caused this weird result has been overturned, why are we even talking about this old case? Well, because it teaches us some incredibly important lessons about how the legal system really works.
Here's the bottom line. First, the law isn't set in stone. It's alive, it changes, it evolves. Second, legal precedent is unbelievably powerful. It tells lower courts exactly what they have to do until a higher court steps in and changes the rules. Third, documents are king. That relinquishment deed was the single most powerful thing in this whole case. And finally, when you're talking about maintenance, being totally upfront and honest about your finances is absolutely critical. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. The journey from that Batra ruling in 2007 to the Ahuja ruling in 2020 is this powerful reminder that our ideas of justice and law are always being debated, always being refined. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What legal truth that we all accept today might be seen as totally wrong by a court 10 or 20 years from now?